Good morning, everyone. Oh, that's loud. Good morning. I'm so delighted to welcome all of you to the 8th Annual Building a Competitive U.S. Mexico Border Conference here at the Wilson Center. My name is Andrew Rudman. I'm the director of the Mexico Institute. Really a pleasure to have you all here this morning in person and virtually. We're going to kick things off very quickly, dispense with introduction and move right into our keynote address from Senator Ben Ray Lujan, who we're delighted to welcome back to the Wilson Center this morning. Senator Lujan has represented New Mexico in the U.S. Senate since January of 2021. He previously served as U.S. Representative for New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District and House Assistant Speaker in the 116th Congress. He sits on the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, the Committee on Indian Affairs, and the Committee on the Budget. So clearly, not much going on in Senator Lujan's life. Senator Lujan grew up in Nambe, a small farming community north of Santa Fe, was there that he learned New Mexico values, including hard work, dedication, and perseverance from his family and community. Senator Lujan, we are so pleased to have you here this morning. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Muy buenos días a todos. To be with each and every one of you today to start my morning, I want to say thank you, and thank you for the work that you have committed your lives to and what you're going to continue to do. Everyone that is participating virtually, good morning to each and every one of you as well, and I look forward to seeing you in your home states to be here to have a robust conversation, as always, at the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute, but an important partnership with the Border Trade Alliance for the annual joint conference, Building a Competitive U.S. Mexico Border. I also want to recognize later, I believe you'll hear from a friend of many of ours, the current ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, a dear friend of ours from Colorado. But he lives so close to New Mexico, we always claimed Ken. It's an honor to represent many of his family in New Mexico as well. Now, Andrew, thank you as well for your leadership and the work that you do for the introduction, but for bringing us together. Britain, from the Border Trade Alliance, these are important conversations, and you know that. It's why you've committed your life to this and leading the efforts as you both have. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for both of your leadership responsibilities and styles of encouraging more conversation to troubleshoot many challenges. Now, the border is often talked about as a single thing without considering the diverse binational communities that call it home. And Mr. Mayor, you represent the very best of that. One of the areas that I'm very excited about that I'll touch on a little bit later is the work that is taking place between Mexico and the United States, between San Jeronimo and Santa Teresa. And I guess I can attribute this to Governor Abbott. So I want to say thank you to my brothers and sisters in Texas for bringing more attention to New Mexico's border crossings and encouraging more opportunities to come to New Mexico. We're open. Come to New Mexico. It's going to be easier. You'll be happier. I'll stop there so I don't get in trouble with my brothers and sisters from Texas. But in New Mexico, over 180 miles along the border that ranges from robust economic trade zones to some of the most remote stretches on the southern border. And while the border brings its share of security challenges, and we're all working on those as well, and I'll touch on them momentarily, we also know that it's an economic booster. And more economic opportunity yields more security, provides support to border communities, often where there's not enough attention, by the way, where work must be done to have the most robust opportunities for the people that live and work in these communities as anywhere in the United States. It's even led to some legislative initiatives that many of us have been championing. But nonetheless, I hope that we think of and we work towards more opportunity along the border region, along the southern border in the United States and in Mexico. Well, El Paso is a bigger city, and it's a big city when you include the populations of Las Cruces and Santa Teresa and Sunland Park with Juarez, it's not that big of a city all on its own. Why don't we have the largest cities of America in these communities? And why don't we think of them in that way with the most robust services? That will spur more economic opportunity. What I hope will be the first border crossing in the United States where you'll be able to do this above ground, per se, from building to building, on a conveyor belt where everything is secured and moving expeditiously. We can understand how that would save dollars, how that would improve robust activity, and how it would prevent what happened in Texas not long ago. But we should be thinking about that transnational opportunity, transportation, getting everything addressed. But in the end, creating more opportunity. In the end, this is about global competitiveness, right? Finally, are the Americas being talked about the robust way that they should, with what's happening around the rest of the world? And that's what I appreciate about being here at the Wilson Center. The conversations that are had from a global economy, from a global security perspective, the opportunities we have all known have been immense and continue to be immense with the Americas, starting with the relationship with the United States and with Mexico. Nearshoring and onshoring. There's no opportunity that the next decade transforms these communities, and that the next century will create opportunities unlike those that we've imagined. I'm excited about what this means. So in New Mexico, we have border crossings from Antelope Wells, which are some of the smaller ones, and in Columbus, to the largest in Santa Teresa, and economies growing around them. I've mentioned New Mexico several times so that you all relocate there. So we want you all to keep coming to New Mexico. The mayor will show you around personally, and we're open for business. We need more communities to have that spirit, though. We need more elected leaders, business leaders, community leaders from across the United States to embrace the opportunities that are abound, to jump in and to solve challenges, not to continue to demagogue and demonize. That doesn't create an opportunity for anybody. All it does is it puts people in harm's way. I think that, one, we can change whatever stigma has been created from the language that people use, and then continue to learn from each and every one of you and do what you do in creating those opportunities. Just start in New Mexico, and then we'll help spread it out everywhere across the country. Now, as the entry points of goods from Mexico and each port contribute to the over 350% rise in trade with Mexico since 2007, helping to support more than 63,000 jobs in our state, again, I say there's more opportunity, and it's coming. We have a chance to visit with all of these companies that are relocating. As a result of the growing ports, New Mexico was able to attract companies like Intel to invest in manufacturing jobs, and signed an MOU with Taiwan to support business operations with Taiwanese companies and to provide a greater proximity to the North American market. These are just a few examples of the interconnectedness of our border and our businesses. To build on this progress, we must focus on collaboration and on building a competitive border where trade and people can move. And that's one of the areas that we often talk about, is the changes that were done in the 1980s, which I appreciate how it treated people, but it left people out, oddly enough, because the concentration was more on the movement of goods, not on the movement of people. And now we see those challenges. Labor shortages abound. We see a U.S. economy that does depend on immigration. And if we don't get this immigration reform policy done correctly, it's going to suffer. Our GDP will suffer. Families will suffer. Businesses will suffer. Opportunities will go by the wayside. And so I'm excited about what this means, whether we pass a comprehensive bill, which I support, or looking at individual packages to see how we can make progress. I just got off the phone with several agricultural producers across New Mexico where they were talking about worker shortages as well. Now, this is consistent across the United States. And in order for the GDP in America to grow, we need more people coming to the United States. And we need to stop this nonsense of this partisan bickering, and again, the language that's being used by many across the country. I know we can make it better, but when we get up and we clean our faces, we brush our teeth in the morning, I hope we all look in the mirror to see what more we can do. And sometimes while you're doing everything you can, you could talk to one more person. That one conversation may change how people look at this. You never know what's going to resonate with someone. So in addition to the work that we'll do from a capitalistic perspective and in encouraging these trade opportunities, think about your friends and neighbors, those that are elected in the communities that you call home. Invite them down, show them around, and show them the promise that these opportunities can bring. Now, investing in our ports of entry is going to be critically important. One of the last pieces of legislation that was signed into law by President Trump, it was led by one of our very own from New Mexico, Xochitl Torres-Small, who is now with the United States Department of Agriculture. And what it required was 100% screening inbound to the United States. Right now, I think we've grown to near 10% of passenger vehicles that are being screened coming into the United States. But it's still a small number. We started this when the number was like 5 or 6%. Why isn't it 100%? Why don't we make investments for the movement of goods into the United States to make them more secure? And in the same vein, now that we are accelerating nearshoring into the Americas, work with those partners as well, so that way we can deal with this congestion and it's all compatible technology. Now, I've said to the Mexican president and to leaders that I've chatted with down that way, the United States should also be screening outbound to stop the flow of guns and other things that are moving out of the United States to our southern partners as well. If we can make those changes, I think we're going to accelerate commercial opportunity and activity and make things better for everyone, while we're also going to pull some of our friends that are not there on these issues yet. We'll be able to take that argument away from them. And I say, why stop there? The northern border needs this investment as well, as do all of our water ports and our airports as well. If we can make these changes across the United States and work with partners across the Americas, we'll be able to accelerate that nearshoring as well, with more security and more opportunity. Now, I know I've gone on and on and on. I've probably used all of my time. I want to conclude by simply saying thank you. Thank you for furthering this conversation. Thank you to both of you for allowing this conversation to take place. There are many challenges in front of us, but we have some of the smartest people in the country and around the world that are participating here. I think more of us just need to listen to your recommendations and ideas and see what we can do to open up these trade opportunities. So to each and every one of you, congratulations. Thank you. I wish you a very successful conversation, and I look forward to learning from each and every one of you. And when your schedule allows, come on down to New Mexico. We'll show you around. We'll sell you some land. Thank you again. Bye-bye. And I apologize, I have to get running, as you all know, with the schedules that you all carry. Today's one of those days for me, so with your permission, I'm going to excuse myself. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks to Senator Lujan for kicking us off, I think, with some really inspiring work, inspiring comments about what we want to do today. And so we appreciate him for being here. I want to again welcome everybody here in the auditorium, and those of you who are watching online. Really appreciate having you all here. I want to thank our sponsors, Constellation Brands, IBC Bank, and the Fresh Produce Association of the Americas, without whose support we couldn't do this. And particularly thank Britton Mullen and the BTA team, who have been great partners with us, not only for this, the 8th annual, but for the prior 7 conferences, including last year's online. So Britton, thank you and your team for partnering with us. The border region, you all know, is unique. It has cultural, linguistic, and economic ties that are driven by personal relationships and centuries of history. My own first exposure to the region, to the border region, came when I was working in the NAFTA office at the Commerce Department almost 2 decades ago. when a visiting delegation came to Washington from Laredo. And they came because they wanted to be sure that we understood that while the border separates our two countries in a geographic and political sense, it doesn't divide the historically integrated region where the linkages date back way before NAFTA or the USMCA, which of course will celebrate its second anniversary next week. And what they stressed, what those visitors, I remember them stressing, was that NAFTA was helping to create a really dynamic region in the world. And we look now, if we put ourselves 20 years ago and now think forward to how much more dynamic the region has become. But the border region, and this I also learned, and I suspect those of you from the region will tell me that it sadly remains the case, even though the border region impacts the lives of almost everybody in North America every day, the region is still underappreciated and often misunderstood. And so one of the things we're trying to do with this series of conferences, this 8th annual conference, is to try to correct some of those misperceptions and to highlight the potential of the region. And we'll do that. We'll cover a number of issues, challenges, and opportunities today in the short, medium, and long term. During our discussion, I think inevitably speakers, panelists, those of you watching here or at home will raise valid concerns and frustrations with the way things are or are not working. And I think there will also be suggestions of aspirational suggestions of what could we do? How could we make more progress? How could we promote economic growth? How could we obtain equitable development? And so I hope today, and Senator Lujan referenced this, I'd like to challenge all of us on trying to focus on proposing solutions that will provide policymakers with actionable ideas. And that's really the ideal behind the creation of the Wilson Center, to bring people together to try to solve difficult problems, to identify challenges and come up with solutions. And I know that's what brought all of you here to Washington this week, was to do exactly that, to talk to folks about what can we do to make the border function better for everybody. And now what I'd like to do is bring up to the stage Hector Serna, the IBC Bank Eagle Pass President and CEO, and he'll have the honor of introducing our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I see Ambassador Wayne. I was fortunate enough to introduce the ambassador in his home a few years ago in Mexico City, and it seemed somewhat odd for me introducing you in your own home, but I have the opportunity to make another introduction today at our conference. It's great to be here at the Wilson Center, Mexico Institute in person once again. It's also a pleasure to welcome a fellow Texan, Congressman August Pfluger, who represents West Texas, the West Texas cities of Llano, Brownwood, Granbury, my niece's hometown of San Angelo, Midland, Odessa, and much of the Permian Basin, which is the top oil and gas producing region of the nation. A colonel in the Air Force Reserves, the congressman is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, and he served in uniform for nearly 20 years, as a decorated fighter pilot commanding hundreds of airmen, as well as serving at the Pentagon and NATO. Congressman Pfluger has a special insight to the border, not just because he represents Texas in a border state, but also from his perch at the House Homeland Security Committee. So we are very, very much appreciate that he will be joining us today, and please join me in welcoming Congressman August Pfluger. Thank you very much. Great to see you. You're very welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be back at the Wilson Center and to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that is our relationship. And I think when you look at my district, to say that we have a strong relationship from my district with Mexico is an understatement. In fact, we've been working together for generations whether it's agriculture, energy, or security. It's all of the above, and we have such an important relationship that I think focusing on it is extremely important. And so thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about something that is not only important to my district, but it's important to my family, quite honestly. So the topic that I really want to get into has to do with our trade, and it revolves around how we move into, I think, the stability and the consistency that gets us to a point where we know that from Texas, being Mexico's largest trading partner, and vice versa in the United States, that we can do some amazing things together. My district is about 100 miles from the Mexican border. My family operates agricultural ranching production about 100 miles from the border. And in some cases over the last 3 or 4 decades has been closer than that. But we are deeply affected by this relationship. Texas, I believe, although I'm just one of 36 representatives, we have a vested interest in making sure that our trading relationship is very strong and that we are going to lead, I believe, in the North American discussion. Just a couple of years ago, very proud to have witnessed USMCA being signed into law. And I think now is the time to address the issues that could be potentially holding us back from making that even stronger. I know that later on today, you're going to hear from both ambassadors, Ambassador Salazar and Ambassador Moctezuma. And I think that'll be a very interesting discussion. And I challenge the group to ask good, hard questions that move us forward and move the ball down the field, so to speak, that we can continue to strengthen that relationship. I represent a large portion of the Permian Basin, which is responsible for 40% of the United States production of oil and gas. And it's a significant factor in our security, not just the United States. When I say our security, I'm talking about North American security, that of Mexico, the United States, and Canada, to be honest. We have not just a significant product that's being exported, but Mexico alone purchased over $30 billion of petroleum products in 2019. So there's a significant trading aspect that partnership, whether it was from NAFTA or now into USMCA, is a relationship, that partnership can't be underestimated. And our economies, as you well know, are completely intertwined together. And I think that when we look at USMCA, the questions that I have, I wouldn't be doing you any good if I came up here and wasn't honest with our relationship. These are things that are being asked, not just of the ambassadors, but also of U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai, conversations that I have had with her, concerns about the relationship when we sign this into law and make it so that the relationship on energy specifically can be incredibly strong. And there's concerns about the hydrocarbon law that is in place in Mexico. And I have personal concerns because there are operators in Texas that are doing work to invest in a resource-rich country, but we need to have the trust. And the trade relationship needs to be one that without that trust, when we're working together, and I think that North America, quite honestly, when we look at energy dominance, from Canada all the way to Mexico, we have the ability in North America right this second to compete with people like Russia and China around the world. Just a couple of months ago, in fact, about 20 days before the invasion of Ukraine, I sat across from President Zelensky in Kyiv, and we talked about energy, and we talked about the importance of energy to Ukraine, and we talked about whether or not the Nord Stream project had an effect on the invasion, the impending invasion. Remember, this is just before. And he said, without that pipeline, the Russians wouldn't have the leverage or the impetus. So this describes to me that if an invasion can happen worlds away, in Eastern Europe, then we as North Americans should be working very hard on our relationship. And that revolves around trust, and it revolves around a strong trading relationship. And so as somebody who represents the Permian Basin, who has the know-how, the innovation, the technology, and the advancement through the shale revolution, and looking at the resources that exist in Mexico, I think it's very important that we address these issues, that we live not just by the letter of USMCA, but by the spirit of it. And so when you look at a hydrocarbon law that has the potential to have permits revoked, or has the potential to nationalize the energy industry, which then disrupts the trade relationship, it's concerning. And it's something that I know we all want to work on, and we want to get to a point where we can leverage those resources. And now is the time to compete. Now is the time to compete with Russia. Now is the time to compete with China. Now is the time to use our resources in a healthy way, increase the balance of trade between our countries, so that we have the ability to do that competition, which to me revolves around national security. So I bring everything back to the lens of security, and I believe that that's the proper lens that we should. Obviously, we know that there are many actors, whether they're cartels or whether they're criminal organizations, that are taking advantage of vulnerable populations. And I hope that we can get to a point where we stop that. But that also impacts our trading relationship. Instead of trading in the form of human trafficking, let's trade in the form of agricultural products, of energy products, of all the things that make our economy stronger. So I don't want to go too much further into some of those issues, but I do want to say that in the last couple of days, there has been a very historic election in Texas, one that I believe will strengthen us further and strengthen the relationship, and that is Mayra Flores, the first Mexican-born U.S. representative in Congress. And this is incredibly important, regardless of party. Okay, I want to make that very clear. Obviously, I'm very glad on my side of the aisle to see her as a Republican, but regardless of party, think about the strength that can come from somebody like Mayra Flores, who was born in Mexico, comes to the United States, understands issues on both sides of the border that will get us to a point where we can leverage everything I've just been talking about and do it in a way that brings both of our economies, both of our security situations, and our overall, just our overall trade position in the world up so much further. So I'm proud to stand beside someone like Mayra Flores, who has that deep knowledge, and proud to represent the district I do, because we do work so closely with our partner to the south. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. I understand there may be some time for questions or discussion, so Hector, if it's okay,
Absolutely.
I'd love to open it up for any questions.
I tell you what, I'll start off with a question, Congressman. We've seen the debate over whether Title 42 is the best mechanism to control unauthorized migration. Any thoughts on your perspective on a post-Title 42, or what it should include, and whether Title 42 should remain indefinitely? We understand that Title 42 is CDC driven. It's really a health issue. We talk about migration. That's really Title 8 and the fundamental immigration issue. Would you please comment on that?
You bet, absolutely. If you're not familiar with Title 42, it is something in the U.S. Code that is driven off of a health emergency and was enacted as a result of the pandemic, which allows U.S. CBP, specifically mostly Border Patrol agents, to turn away people that are migrating to the United States because of the health-related concerns. To me, this is a symptom. It's not the actual problem. And I think that our countries, when I talk about working together, the migrant protection protocols is something that the MPP that was instituted several years ago is a much better solution, because this doesn't just happen at the border, whether it's in Del Rio or whether it's in the Rio Grande Valley. It doesn't just happen along the U.S. Mexico border. This is something that happens through Central America, in some cases South America, and all the way up through the country of Mexico, finally arriving to the U.S. border. But I think our countries can work smarter together. We can work in a way that is more meaningful. Title 42 is if you want to use a American football analogy, this is your goal line defense. Why don't we work down the field where you have some room to actually do good, to help with compassion, but to also have the rule of law. And to me, that's the biggest issue that we're facing, is not having the rule of law at our own border. And now, just look at it from this standpoint. There are people who are escaping horrible situations wherever they may be. And by the way, it's not just one or two countries. This is 160 different countries over the past 2 years that we know. So whatever their situations are, now they come to the United States and they're being forced into an underground criminal aspect where you're teaching your kids how to evade the law, And from an American employment side, it's very difficult to deal with that. And so there's many issues I could give you on the security side, but I'm trying to pull on the heartstrings of now almost 2.9 million people have been encountered in the last year and a half, almost 2 years, 2 fiscal years. Those people are now living underneath the radar, below the rule of law, in a situation that is completely unhealthy and actually is a return to in some cases, what they were escaping. So I'm not dancing around the Title 42 question, but I think that it's a symptom, not actually the problem.
We had a question. I know, Russ, you want to ask a question? We had one that was sent in earlier. To what extent, well, we know that the supply chain has been devastated as a result of the pandemic, and to what extent will the infrastructure bill help improve this country's supply chain in moving goods and services to customers, There's a great project that's ongoing in Texas that affects 5 ports of entry. It's ports to plains, I-27. And I think that's part of the bipartisan infrastructure. Now, listen, as a fiscal conservative, I had some issues with the overall bill, but there is no question we need infrastructure. That infrastructure, and specifically what ports to plains does by affecting the cities of Laredo and Eagle Pass and Del Rio, and there's a couple of others, but along the border, the Texas-Mexico border, I-35 goes straight up through Austin and Dallas and on up. Now, another corridor west shifts the traffic flow, alleviates some of that burden, hits 5 ports of entry. And when you look at places like Laredo, I mean, this is a major port of entry, and I think that the supply chain issues will be directly affected by having another artery that runs all the way up, through the Midwest, through Texas and all the way up through the Midwest, and allows trade to continue in a slightly different part of the country. I think it's going to have a huge impact. There are other ways that, whether we're building out roads and other types of infrastructure like rail, through my district, we have a rail that actually ends up on the west coast of Mexico, and it's a very good option for maybe alleviating some of these supply chain issues that we're seeing. That's wonderful. That was not a loaded question. It just happens to impact my community as well, my hometown, and we've been working on ports to plains for probably 20 years now, so we really congratulate y'all for getting that approved. We have time for one more question. Russ, I'll repeat the question. Go ahead. I'll repeat the question.
Can I speak from here?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's an irony when we're talking, when you alluded, Congressman, to the worker situation in the United States, that USMCA has a program within it to bring highly technical professionals in the U.S. and it's a merit-based system. And after 5 years, if they do everything they do every year, they can actually get a green card. And after another 5 years, they can actually immigrate. So within USMCA, we have something, but it's so narrow that there's a whole other levels of supervision and highly skilled individuals that cannot be eligible for that program, and it's already in place. On the other hand, we have the H-2A program, which is, again, very narrow and very laborious. It's not agile enough to meet the needs of American agriculture and other types of blue-collar worker positions. But unlike Mexico and Canada, that have very, very robust guest worker programs that are very transparent and work very well, we just have this kind of piece there and this other piece here. Should we look to USMCA and expanding that process, or should we look to other legislation to either on a pilot project to replace or modernize H-2A?
What a great question. I think this hits at the heart of so many issues, and I'll skip over my border security thoughts on how this interacts with security, but I hope you know where I stand on that. So let's get to the issue of people that are working in this country, that have been working in this country for years. We have many in my district who employ people from Mexico, from other Central and South American countries who come year in and year out, and the lack of consistency, the lack of predictability is very tough on these businesses. So yes, we have to be more agile on this. We have to get to a point, and I don't know if it's just a legislative or just a USMCA issue or just an executive branch, program in some of their different agencies. I think it actually is probably all of the above, and we need to look at every aspect of it. USMCA probably outlines what we can do, and then within our bureaucratic agencies, and I know this isn't going to surprise anybody, the red tape that you have to go through to get into a lottery system as a business owner, a lottery system to get the same people back. I mean, this is ridiculous. There has to be predictability in this system. And we know we need labor in a lot of specific issues. And I can tell you two in my district, particularly agriculture and the oil and gas industry. These are not displacing American jobs. The predictability has to get to a point where these business owners can trust it. And so I think it is legislative, and I think it is USMCA, and I think it is reform on the immigration system in a lot of different ways where we're giving the business owners the sustainable, predictable model, but we're also making sure that everyone here in the United States that needs a job is able to do that and has the faith and the confidence that we're not mixing and mingling or replacing something that could be done by Americans. And I think that's the narrative, the false narrative, quite honestly, that is out there that needs to be addressed. So I know for our, we have a gentleman who owns a fencing company, and he was just able to get his workers in a fencing company that does work on ranches and farms that is agricultural in nature. He was just able to get them into the H-2A program where years, and we're talking 2 decades, 3 decades, it's been on a lottery system, which is extremely unpredictable for him. And then it affects the trade. So at the end of the day, this is affecting our producers' ability to either grow the products or raise the livestock and trade in a way that's meaningful. So I appreciate the question. I don't have all the answers. If I did, I would have solved it by now. But it's something that we have to work towards. So,
Congressman, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate your thoughts. You've mentioned stability and consistency in several times, and I think that's perhaps what's most important for business and for life in general, to have consistency and stability. So we appreciate that.
Well, Hector, thank you so much to the Wilson Center for having me today. This is very important to us. I appreciate the fact that you're putting the time and the effort into listening to people like me, but more importantly, to coming up with policy ideas that my office and others can use. So Kudos to you for doing that. It means a lot to us. Please continue to do that. I hope that the day goes very well. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move right along into our first panel. So I'd like to invite those panelists who are here in person to join us on the stage, as well as our moderator. And while they are coming up on the stage and we are connecting our virtual panelists, let me just share a little bit of background on what prompted us to kick off our series of panels focusing on water, on current and future use of water. And we thought this was a very timely topic to address. If we think back just to 18 months ago in October of 2020, serious armed conflict was averted in Mexico, fortunately, over compliance with the 1944 bilateral water treaty. We're facing record drought on both sides of the border, leading to rationing. Residents of Arizona and Nuevo Leon, for example, are facing serious water use restrictions. Business decisions have been driven by concerns about availability and use of fresh water. And there are longstanding cross-border concerns regarding the treatment of sewage and wastewater, which impacts the beaches on our Pacific coast. And when I say our, I mean both Mexico and the U.S. coasts. Last Friday, coincidentally, and I promise we had nothing to do with it, the Washington Post did a special section called "The Colorado River is in Crisis and It's Getting Worse Every Day." This section focuses primarily on the U.S. side of the border, as might not be surprising, but the messaging is pretty clear. Water is potentially the next major flashpoint between our countries, and it's not because there's animosity between our leaders or our people. It's just simply there's scarcity of water on both sides of the border. Fortunately, there are institutions, including several represented on today's panel, that are focusing on these and other related issues in the search for durable bilateral solutions. And one of those institutions, of course, is the North American Development Bank, which has financed 289 total environmental infrastructure projects and has contracted $3.4 billion to finance projects representing a total investment of over $10 billion. The majority of those projects, 170 of the 289, are water and wastewater projects. So I think it's fair to say that the NAD Bank as well recognizes that water is a potential issue and flashpoint if we don't address it carefully. And I'm pleased, therefore, to introduce John Beckham, Deputy Managing Director of the NAD Bank, who will moderate today's panel. John began his 4-year term with the bank on January 16, 2021. Prior to joining the NAD Bank, he worked at the Inter-American Investment Corporation for 19 years, where he held various positions, including Chief of Debt, Chief of Equity, and Managing Director Clients. He also served as Chief Investment and Operating Officer for Microvent, a private impact investment management company. So, John, thank you for moderating today's panel, and we'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the Wilson Institute and the Mexico Institute, the Wilson Center, for inviting all of us to participate here. And it's a pleasure to be with both commissioners who I had the opportunity to know already. So good to I see you again, and meet Eduardo, and as well as meet Eugenio and Susana, who are with us virtually. And we'll do some intros in a second. One building on what Andrew said, I just want to set up a little of the picture for everybody here to provide a little more detail as we see it at the bank on the challenges water can provide for realizing the competitive opportunities we have throughout the binational relationship and the border region in particular. First one is that Andrew already alluded to is the water scarcity. I don't think we need to dwell on that anymore. The only fact I'll say is there's not a lot of slack in the system. The reservoirs are at historic lows at around 30% in the capacity is filled with water. So there is a certain degree of urgency to addressing these challenges. A second is there remains, despite our efforts of trying to invest in the border region at the NAD Bank and in partnership with local communities, there remains unequal access to water and wastewater. So there are some isolated poor communities on both sides of the border that still don't have access to wastewater treatment and clean water. And that is a challenge, I think, for the overall well-being and competitiveness of our border region. I think those of us who are specialized in the water know about the problems of wastewater flows in the Tijuana River. I think those are a topic that continue to merit our discussion and addressing. Our view is that's only one of several similar challenges. We have them in Nogales. They exist in El Paso and Juarez, both Laredos, and down in Matamoros and Brownsville. So I think that is a chronic challenge that we need to figure out to put on a longer-term footing how we can invest to manage the wastewater flows that tend to affect the well-being of both communities as well as the national relationship. The fourth point that we think sort of sets the stage is a good story is the demographic and economic growth of the region. 26 million people live on the border, about 7 million in the U.S. and 19 million in Mexico. And those rates are increasing, especially on the northern side of the border. So that is creating additional population demand for the resources that we're talking about, the water resources as well as other natural resources. Lastly, one that we have not traditionally focused on at the NAD Bank, but one that we are now considering after deliberation with our board is how we can invest in agriculture on both sides of the border to make it more efficient user of water. Because currently, on average, 76 to 80%, to 76 and 40%, 76 in Mexico, 40% in the United States, of the water being drawn is used for agriculture. So the savings that we can have there will have a material impact. And we think there's an opportunity to invest on small and middle-sized agriculture producers as well as larger ones to technify them, make it more efficient, crop substitution, things of that nature. So that is a focus that we're working on in the bank. And we think it's something that merits the discussion overall. So I hope that brief assessment sort of sets up some facts. I think they're facts. But anyway, hopefully for some discussion here. So with that, I'm going to let our panelists briefly introduce themselves and what the organizations and their perspective. So I want to start by introducing Adriana Resende. Actually, I'll start with virtually because they always get short shrift. So I'm going to start with Eugenio Barrios of the Rio Arronte Foundation. Eugenio is a director of water for Fundación Gonzalo Rio Arronte. He has 30 years of experience in water resource management at a national and regional level. He's worked in both private and public sector, including the World Wildlife Fund in Mexico, Mexico's National Water Council, the United Nations, and has served as Director General of Mexico's Water Commission, Conagua. He holds an engineering degree from La Universidad Autónoma de México and a Master of Science in Environmental Engineering from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. So Eugenio, I'll let you turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Fundación Gonzalo Rio Arronte, I would like to start by congratulating the Wilson Center for organizing this event, very important event in terms of the big problem, the border in Mexico, U.S. Mexico border. And thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel. Water is becoming the big issue at the border, and it is important to talk about this. The Fundación Gonzalo Rio, I will start talking a little bit about the Fundación. The Fundación Gonzalo Rio is a Mexican foundation established around 20 years ago by the great Mexican entrepreneur and philanthropist, Mr. Gonzalo Riarronte, who left all his legacy to support Mexican people to deal with three big problems. At that time, health, drug addiction, and water. Perhaps nowadays, this mandate of the Fundación to focus on these three big issues has never been so meaningful to face the most important global problems, that is poverty, biodiversity loss, and climate change. In these 20 years, the Fundación has developed around 400 water projects around the country with a total investment of $300 million. And we have support 169 organizations, most of them from the civil society. Along the border, we have support in these 20 years, 25 projects with a total investment of 20 million. 11 of them I'm currently running with a total investment of 16 million. 7 of them are coming from directly from the Fundación. And let me just briefly talk about these projects because are very good examples of what's the challenges we have and what are the solutions we need to start thinking about. In the Rio Tijuana, we support the organization Programa Fronterizo de Educación Ambiental, developing the project Hydrological Park Miramar, which is focusing on restore an urban canyon, improve solid waste management, urban runoff, and the living condition of the poorest people of Tijuana, many of them immigrants living on irregular settlements. What used to be abandoned land and people now is becoming an opportunity to regenerate urban landscapes, reduce risks from big storms, and transform the Tijuana River down to the San Diego marshes, a U.S. National Park. In Mexicali, we are working with the Sonoran Institute in the Rio Nuevo to improve Las Arenitas wastewater treatment plant by adding an artificial wetland and start thinking about reclaiming wastewater. We are supporting the first phase of this project that could become perhaps the first reclaimed wastewater irrigation in the region. Also with the Sonoran Institute, we have supporting a very nice project that maybe some of you know, the Mexicali Fluye project, which aims to transform the irrigation drains into urban wetlands and then transform urban neighborhoods and improve waste management, biodiversity, and water management with a very strong social participation. Currently, the project is working to restore 5 kilometers out of 65. In the Colorado River, since some years ago, we are supporting Pro Natura Noroeste as a part of the binational coalition Raise the River to restore the Colorado Delta. And well, this is a very nice story that most of you know. Further down the border, since many years ago, we are supporting water and sanitation projects for the indigenous people in the Cerro Tarahumara. This project started many years ago with a few families, and now it's a very important Chihuahua government program from the state of Chihuahua that is providing water supply by rain harvesting systems to near 23,000 people. So it's becoming a very good scale. Also in Chihuahua, we are supporting WWF to develop the project Maximum Aquifer Recharge that is aiming to develop a new approach to aquifer restoration. Also in the border, but a little bit south, we are supporting a coalition of NGOs and the government of Coahuila to restore the unique wetlands of Cuatro Ciénegas. This project has recovered 60 hectares of wetlands and is pushing to improve wastewater management, reuse, and agricultural irrigation. What all these projects have in common is that they are proposing different approaches to all problems. They are very solid experience, we feel, to transform how water projects have been developed, showing that water and ecosystems are strong driving forces to integrate many solutions. They are improving the social conditions and the participation of people. They are restoring ecosystems and protecting biodiversity. They are proposing new urban landscapes for the enjoyment of people. They are also adapted actions to climate change, reducing risk and improving resilience. Overall, they are very good example of what is now called natural-based solutions. We at the Fundación are clear that these are the kind of projects needed to build a resilient, competitive community. But we are also clear that we need to improve our policies and financial instruments to scale these experiences up. at both sides of the border. I think that's some of the challenge that we have ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edgar. I'd also like to then also introduce our other virtual panelist, Susana Barroso. Susana is the coordinator of Communication Committee of Mexico's Water Advisory Council and president of the 27th branch of alcoholic beverage producers. She has 10 years of experience as a political consultant on different projects with the legislatures and public entities. And she has a political degree from in public administration from the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City, as well as a diploma in U.S. political institutions and U.S. Mexico relations from the University of California, San Diego. Susana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Water Advisory Council, and particularly its president, Raul Rodriguez, we want to thank the Wilson Center for the invitation to this conference to talk about the water usage of today and tomorrow. It is also a pleasure to greet our colleagues on the panel and John Beckham for his coordination. The Water Advisory Council is recognized as an institution by the Mexican National Waters Law. For 22 years, the Council has represented the voice of academics, scientists, civil society, and private sector interested in the creation of programs and policies around the water. The Council's participation in this forum gives us the opportunity to raise a critical issue that is under analysis and discussion in Mexico: the human right to water access and how we can make it a reality. This concept was introduced in the Mexican political constitution in 2012 and promotes a call to action to all sectors and all levels of government and society to comply with a right to personal and domestic consumption that considers the following criteria: that is sufficient, healthy, acceptable, and affordable. This means securing the availability to sufficient volumes of water for personal and domestic use, assuring the quality of the water is acceptable for human consumption, providing adequate infrastructure to transport the water and prevent water loss, implementing efficient monitoring of drinking water and its discharge. On the border between Mexico and the United States, we are in a potential crisis of water scarcity, and although the future of water seems complex, it is necessary to get down to work and plan management solutions from two perspectives. The first being regional. In the context of the Mexico-U.S. relations, by identifying meteorological calendars, protection of ecosystems, the water circularity and its multiple uses, investments, population growth, among others. The second one being local and municipal, which allows us to focus technical objectives and potential risks from the particular social and environmental significance of the different bodies of water. There are many tools we can use within the strategies to manage water, and we must include interventions to accomplish the human right to water access from a multi-sectoral approach. It requires a participation of all levels of the Mexican and U.S. governments and society, including the private sector. We can learn from success stories such as the one of Israel that considers within its planning flexible elements such as a national water infrastructure system, circular economy of water, water desalination that allows drinking water to be prioritized in uses for human consumption, protection and use of aquifer reserves, replenishment of subsoil waters, efficient water technologies for irrigation, promotion of social awareness of the value of water, and creating and maintaining water management systems for ecosystems. Within the Council, after several analyses of the Mexican legal framework, we have concluded that to advance with an effective human right to water access, we need, first, water security planning with an environmental perspective, which considers climate change and uses adequate interventions that allow adaptive flexibility, such as water banks. Second, legal certainty, to allow all users and all levels of U.S. and Mexican governments to act within their attributions and capacities. Third, adequate infrastructure and resources to develop and maintain it from the municipal level, so that planning considers population structures and their growth. And fourth, effective sanctions to protect groundwater and surface water. The binational waters should be seen as an element of national security, since potential crises cannot only be reflected in scarcity, but in social, political, environmental, and even food sufficiency crises. It is about seeking effective and efficient mechanisms for coordination and transparent decision making. We must understand that opaque decisions promote a lose-lose scheme in water access. Clear rules and transparency allows us to know where we stand and how to participate. And planning allows us to know where we can participate more effectively and with greater impact for the benefit of our communities. Political will is a key element to coordinate and move towards an active agenda that promotes water for future generations. In conclusion, goodwill, human rights, and water security strategies must be in the center of the conversation towards a comprehensive water administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. I'll briefly introduce Edgar Guillamin. Edgar is Vice President of Public Affairs for Constellation Brands in Washington, D.C. He has extensive experience in government affairs and corporate communications, spanning 15 years in the public and private sector. And he's worked at DHL, Kansas City Southern, as well as served as Director of Investment Attraction in the state of Michoacán. He holds a law degree from the Universidad Latinoamericana Latina de America and a PhD in public policies from Anáhuac University. He has specialized studies from Stanford and Harvard Business School. Thanks for joining us, Edgar.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Wilson Center, Border Trail Alliance for the invitation. It's a great honor to share this panel with you. I would like to start with a brief concept of Constellation Brands. Constellation Brands is one of the largest alcohol beverage companies in North America. Our portfolio has iconic brands like Modelo, Corona, Victoria, Pacifico in the beer division, but also we have a strong portfolio on wines like Robert Mondavi, Prisoner, mainly in California. Our main operations are located on the border states of California, Sonora, and Coahuila in Mexico. As an agricultural-based company, we are committed to be a good player and a good steward on environment and water usage. The name of the game here is collaboration, collaboration, and collaboration. We have a strong commitment to reduce between fiscal year 23 and 25 to save 1.1 billion of gallons of water in our operations. In that goal, we have three pillars. One is efficiencies in our operations. Secondly is restore reforestation programs. And third, water accessibility and equality. And we're having worked with different partners in order to achieve those goals. And I can share a couple examples of how we are working in those objectives. First, efficiencies. We have invested a lot of capital in our operations in order to be more and more efficient on the water usage in our breweries. So far, we have reduced between 13 and 18% of our water in our breweries in Sonora and Coahuila, and the goal is to have a neutral operational water footprint. That means that all the water that we use in the process eventually will return to the watershed or other water bodies. On the restoration, we partner with an NGO, Pro Natura, a very well-known and respected NGO organization in Mexico, in order to launch a program in La Serranía del Burro in Coahuila, where the aquifer is recharged. That specific geographic zone suffered a wildfire a couple years ago, and we engaged in a 10-year program to have a very aggressive reforestation program along with the local community. We partner with local women. They are running the plant nurseries, so we train them. We found the facilities, and now we are purchasing the plants in those local business, and eventually we want to protect not only the aquifer, but also livestock and bring some prosperity on the local community. Regarding water accessibility and quality, in Coahuila, there is a small town called Zaragoza, where our water wells are located. And this community has no water infrastructure. So we partner with the state government, and together we found the reconstruction, or we built the water infrastructure in that community so they can have access. It's not fair if we have our wells there and the community doesn't have access to the water. So we think that it's something that we have to work together with the local leaders, with farmers, water users, and government at the three different levels: federal, state, and local. And that is our commitment, and really happy to answer questions later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. Last but never least, I'm going to individually introduce our two commissioners from the IBWC and SILA. First, I'll introduce Adriana Resende Maldonado. Adriana is the Mexican Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission. For over 20 years, she has helped facilitate the Mexico-U.S. relationship regarding water usage, from supervising and operating hydraulic works on the Rio Bravo and Rio Colorado to ensuring compliance with bilateral treaties. She holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a master's degree in hydraulic resources of arid zones from the Universidad Autónoma de Chihuahua.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for the invitation. I think there is no translation.
No, I understand
Okay.
there is no translation.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Wilson Center for the invitation, and have with this panel, also with my counterpart, Commissioner Keynote, whom I share the challenge to lead the IBWC. We are currently facing three major challenges: the drought on the Colorado River and the drought of the Rio Bravo River, and also the sanitation problems. Throughout our history as a commission, we have dealt with various problems, including sanitation in 19th decade, as well as the drought on the Rio Grande. Nowadays, we are experiencing at the same time an unprecedented historic drought on both basins, Colorado and Rio Bravo River, as well as a problem of border sanitation in some cities of the border. The 1944 Water Treaty allocates Mexico 1.5 million of acre-foot and annually for the Colorado River. And the event of an extraordinary drought, it established that goods will be applied to Mexico proportionally to the United States. Mexico has, and the SILA has a minute 3 to 3. Have established in that minute we have established some guidelines to address the shortage in the Colorado River. It's better. In the Colorado River.
I use 16 font.
Yes.
Because my vanity project won't let me do that.
Yes. Under that meeting, water conservation projects are being implemented in the Mexicali Valley Irrigation District to make water use more efficient in Mexico and to conserve water for more sustainable use of this resource. We are aware of the critical conditions in the Colorado River Basin, which is experiencing an unprecedented drought, and of the effort being made in the United States to protect the levels of the two Great Lakes, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. In the Commission, we are exploring through a working group prospective measures to benefit the system, and consequently to the users of both countries. We are working on that. We are working on some conservation programs. We are working a lot with Conagua and with users to identify some projects to protect the Lake Mead, to protect water users in Mexico, to have a better use in the district. Regarding Rio Bravo, the 1944 treaty assigns water to the United States from the 6 Mexican tributaries of the Rio Grande, and in a 5 years in a 5-year cycle. It also established that if a 5-year cycle ends with a deficit, the missing volumes will be replenished in the following cycle. The Rio Bravo is experiencing the lowest runoff years of records, so there is currently a shortfall in the water deliveries years of the water deliveries from Mexico to the United States. If this continues, the current cycle will end with a considerable deficit. To address this issue, there is the minute 325 of the Commission, and also there is 2 working groups that it's the hydrology working group and the policy group. The hydrology working group has the mission to identify some delivery scenarios and potential conservation projects and new water sources. Mexico has identified several projects that could contribute significant to the water treaty compliance, including desalination of the water from the Morillo Drain, desalination of seawater, construction of an aqueduct, a dam in the lower Colorado, in the lower Rio Grande, among others. We have a great challenge in the Rio Bravo, and climate change is a reality. It is negatively affecting the runoff of our international basins, and we must work together to make optimal use on our resource. We cannot wait for wet years. We cannot wait more. We cannot wait 1 year more. We need to do something now. We must identify and implement conservation projects and new water sources. About border sanitation, 80% of the sanitation system of the Mexican population of the northern border have deficiencies in their infrastructure. So Mexico, through the Mexican section, developed and prepare a sanitation program for the northern border and at the Grand Vision level that identify other actions and alternatives for border sanitation problems. As well as a portfolio of projects to address the problem and establish an ordinary priority. The reuse of treated water represents a great opportunity to address water scarcity problems in the international watersheds. Addressing the issue of border sanitation involves different actors in both countries, so we need to work together to solve this problem. These are the 3 great challenges we are facing as a commission and as a country in the border. One of the greatest challenges is to identify sources of resources required for its attention. As International Commission, I think we have the commitment to attend them, always seeking the benefits of the users of both countries. Thank you very much, and sorry about my English.
Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you.
I also have the pleasure of introducing Maria Elena Jenner, Commissioner of the IBWC United States section. She was appointed by President Biden to serve late last year, and she's the second woman and first Latina to hold the post. She previously served as General Manager of the Border Environment Cooperation Commission, BEC, That's an organization that has been intimate to the success of the NAD Bank. And she has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Loyola Marymount University, an MBA from the University of Texas at El Paso, and a PhD in Public Policy from the University of Texas at Austin. Maria Elena, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Well, as I call her affectionately my comadre here, Commissioner Resendes, we are not the good news on the border. And I always bragged about how these institutions, the one I previously represented in the IBWC, we were always the good news. We weren't about migration. We weren't about drug enforcement. But given the situation with the drought, it is very serious and it is very scary. And I'll give you some facts and figures, because my colleague here, Jerónimo Gutierrez, Ambassador, knows that I love to use facts and figures. On the Rio Colorado, the Lake Mead, which is one of the largest dams in the United States, has dropped 120 feet. And for those of us who love to ski, we see the snowpack is great. It's going to fill up. 2 seasons already of great snow. Because of that, and because of climate change, the runoff that was experienced into Lake Mead last year was 30%. Where did that water go? It went into the atmosphere and it went into the ground because of increased temperatures. This year, it's predicted to be 50%. So that's going on in the Rio Colorado. We are expected to go into tier 2 shortages, which will have cuts for both countries in terms of water. In the case of the Rio Grande, what's going on there? Well, as many of you know, and my colleague elaborated, we have a 5-year cycle there. We are at the lowest levels of deliveries of water that come from Mexico. 70% of the water in the Rio Grande comes from Mexico, right? And so right now we have only received about, let me see my statistics here, 14%. And where is this water mostly coming from? It's coming from the Sierra Madre and the Rio Conchos. And those reservoirs are about 0.25% of their capacity. And so what is happening downstream of that? Well, Lake Falcón and Amistad are at less than 25% of their capacity. And this is the primary water source for South Texas and for many communities along the border. Both the Rio Colorado and the Rio Bravo are very important water sources for the agriculture. I know we have in our audience a lot of the associations of agriculture. In the case of the Imperial Irrigation District, it's almost a $3 billion industry. And in the case of South Texas, it's a $1 billion industry. These are the bread baskets of the United States. And we talk about Ukraine and wheat. Well, let me tell you, there's nothing like the watermelons from Zapata County, right? And so given that, we need to care. We need to care, and we need to find quick and innovative solutions for water. We no longer can rely on just cuts. You know, the reality is that many communities on the U.S. side have diversified their water sources. They have multiple sources, but 80% of the water comes from agriculture. And so obviously efficiencies in agriculture are going to be very key to what needs to be done. But in Mexico, water is not diversified in utilities. Most of them have maybe one resource. And so definitely the impact in Mexico is going to be very strong. We've already heard many of the Mexican cities are already having tandeos or cuts in their water sources. And then on the other hand, the other thing that I see that's also very critical is the private sector. How do we involve the private sector within this? Innovation is going to have to be key to this, and the recognition of the value of water is also going to be an important element. Obviously, investment, serious investment from both governments is going to be needed in order to ensure that we have safe water for the residents. You know, John F. Kennedy said, whoever solves, this is our goal, Commissioner, whoever solves the issue of water will get not one, but 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, one for science and the other one for diplomacy. And with that, I conclude my comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Kennedy. With that, I'd like to open it up for questions, if there's any in the audience, virtually or live. I will get via modern technology the virtual questions, so use your platform to send those in, and they'll get to me. But I'll kick one off because obviously the common theme that I heard in all organizations and their representatives here is concern over the scarcity and the need for some coordination and action. So the first question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to exercise some moderator prerogative here, in directing how we answer it, who answers it in the order, is the 1944 bilateral treaty addresses only the surface water, the two river basins that you all mentioned, commissioners. So with these water shortages, a lot of communities are using other sources of underground water, aquifers, and things of that nature. Could or should the treaty be renegotiated to broaden in scope in light of this water shortage? Because, again, many of our city pairs are going to tap into similar resources. So I know the commissioners have thought long and hard about this, so I'm going to let you have the last word. But I would like to open it up to some of our virtual representatives, if they have a thought on that matter, on that question. So, Susana, do you have a? I'll silence here for a second in case you all do.
Yes, thank you. It is a fact that much has changed since 1944 in the U.S. Mexican border. Not only if we consider the population growth that you mentioned at the beginning and the climate change, but also scientific, environmental solutions and tools. Water volumes, surface and groundwater should be evaluated in the light of today's data, and also the light of potential social conflicts regarding water scarcity in the border. So I believe that it is an opportunity to talk about the evaluating the treaty.
Thank you. Eugenio?
Yep. Well, I'm not sure if renegotiating the treaty is the right way to go, but at some point it's clear that groundwater must be included sooner or later. I think not just in the border, but in the world, and in the case of Mexico, it's very clear that we need to start thinking about both groundwater and surface water at the same time. One problem we have here in Mexico is that we regulate surface water with some instruments and groundwater with other instruments. And at the end, you need to put together the balance. I'm wondering if there are some quick opportunities to start thinking about groundwater within the treaty. If we think about the base flow that is included in the surface water that is regulated by the treaty. So in some parts of the Rio Bravo, in some way or another, groundwater is already regulated. So I think it will be important to start looking for those entrance points to start integrating groundwater. And I'm not sure if renegotiating the treaty at this time is the best solution.
Thank you. Edgar, how does Constellation Brands yourself think about this?
Well, I think it's, as I mentioned, about collaboration and also define the priorities and see in a long-term horizon how we can solve it. And key is the partnership with government, research organizations, NGO, and private sector. You mentioned the private sector must play a key role, and the private sector must be more aggressive on attacking this issue.
Thank you, Edgar. Comisionada Giner.
Well, with regards to groundwater, I've already been warned by some of my staff that if I say IBWC is going to get involved in groundwater, I will be fired, right, by some of the states. As many of you know, groundwater in the United States is a very complicated issue. It is managed by property rights. It's managed by some conservation districts. It's managed by some water masters of some states. And so I've pondered this question, obviously, groundwater, whether it be, it is a bowl underground, and if you've got more straws in it, it's gonna suck it dry, right? And so definitely, I think there is a role for us to play in terms of assisting communities in managing groundwater, but this is one that has to come from the ground, from the bottom up, right? Where we either have regional areas requesting our assistance in managing it, which means there's got to be science behind it, which means there's got to be trust behind it, which means there's got to be many tough decisions. And to actually get into management of groundwater, one of the key elements is, as I mentioned before, many communities in Mexico only rely on one source, which is groundwater. So in parallel, there needs to be some policy action with regards to diversifying water supply in Mexico, as well as some of the small communities in the United States where their only resource is groundwater.
Thank you, Commissioner. Comisionada Resente.
Bueno, I'm going to try to explain in English my idea, because we think the water treaty doesn't need to ser renegociado. It is not. The treaty has actas, has an element to establish like an actas. There is an example in the past, the Minute 242, that established some regulations for groundwater in San Luis Rio Colorado. So we have that instrument to implement something about groundwater issues.
Commissioner, just a follow-up question, because Commissioner Giner shared with us some of the complexity of these of the regulatory structure in the United States side of the border regarding groundwater. What's that topography? What's that look like in the Mexican side of the border in terms of water rights and the regulations and the legal structure behind groundwater in Mexico? La estructura, ¿cómo es el marco regulatorio en México para groundwater?
Bueno, en México las aguas son aguas nacionales y es la Conagua la que administra los usos de estas aguas.
So it's less, it's a little more centralized, that legal structure.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any? I do have a question from the virtual audience, and then I'll survey here internally. In some areas of Mexico, like Monterrey, we have seen policies restricting or limiting water usage during certain hours of the day or the week. Could we expect to see similar policies in the U.S.? More broadly, should the U.S. states be encouraged to match the water policies of their Mexican counterparts? You are the U.S. section representative, Commissioner Giner.
So definitely putting policies in place to only provide water certain hours of the day is backsliding big time in what I consider advanced economies, right? And obviously the millennial goals are to provide water 24 hours a day to communities, right? We have seen in South Texas, especially where irrigation districts are required to provide water to some of these small utilities. When there's less water in the river, they cannot get the water down to utilities. So we have seen in the past some challenges with providing water, but I would in no way encourage any sorts of policies in terms of cutting back deliveries or hours of water. It really could have very serious impacts on backflow prevention, contamination of the system, where you've got sewage maybe going into the potable water system.
Thank you. I see a question there in the light blue shirt with the Mexican flag on your sleeve. If you could just introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Luis Solarte. I'm one of the lead persons at Fortune Growers. We are actually a grower. And Maria, you mentioned the number of straws that go into a water table. you should see the size of the straws that we do in agriculture.
Right.
Okay, and the fruits and vegetables are a movement of water because most fruits and vegetables are water. So, but one of the things that we mentioned, and you mentioned collaboration, we have a farm, a large farm, 1,000-acre farm that we use as a training center, and we would love to encourage you to collaborate with people like us because the amount of water that you use, not just to produce, but the movement of all that stuff is immense. And the number of straws that we put into the ground really eats up that water. But, exposure times, there's so many different things that we're learning by collaborating and having universities, internships, and government participate in this learning center is a great thing. So policy is good, but collaborating and coming up with new ways of reducing the usage through those big straws is an encouragement for you.
Great.
Is that a statement? I think more than a
It's
question.
a statement more than a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Someone else had their hand up here in the audience in the purple tie. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a question from Elena, Adriana, and you, John. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is Gustavo de la Fuente with the San Diego Tijuana Smart Border Coalition. And I guess the question really is about the Mexican side of the border and what do you see as the greatest obstacles for water reuse on the Mexican side? I mean, we see some governments, for instance, that are thinking of desal plants. Mm-hmm. And desal plants, as you know, it takes time for those things to happen in the first place. I mean, it can have, it can happen in 5-6 years. By that time, the certain governor is out, and who knows what the next administration is going to do. So what do you see there as the key obstacles? You mentioned private enterprise and how that can have a role in improving things. But I do see some legal challenges and political challenges for that. But wanted to hear your opinion. Thank you.
Commissioners, or do you want me to take a first stab and then you can think? We've been involved in trying to develop several water reuse projects in Baja California. And there's several challenges to them. Some are, if you will, political consensus, and others are the investment costs. The topography is not gentle, so it requires a lot of energy and capital expenditures to move the water from one place after it's been treated to a place where it can be adequately reused. That being said, we do think that there is viability in that concept. The question is how much are people willing to pay for water? And that can vary based on what is the use of the water. I think we do need to have some leadership to begin to move our culture on paying for water. Many people, I agree that water is a right, but we have to create and cultivate its sustainability. That money has to come from somewhere. There isn't enough subsidized money to do everything we need to do given the circumstances we're facing. So there is a consensus building process to try to get, let's say, agricultural users in the Valle de Guadalupe, in this particular case, that they would be interested in saying, well, my wine is actually going to be worth enough to pay so much for a gallon or a liter per second of reused water. So I think that is something we're encouraging. We've done some studies on rate structures and how you can segment your consumer populations to try to come up with a fair but sustainable economic model to bring in money that then creates a more sustainable system in the future. And so I'll see if my colleagues have any other comments to add to that.
Yeah, I think reuse is the one of the biggest opportunities. Thank you. The biggest opportunities in the border. Yes, we are thinking, and that we are we think that is a very important source of water. We want to promote that projects considering reuse. But definitely it's very important point.
I just want to add just very quickly on the reuse. There's low-hanging fruit in reuse, right? Which is conjunctive use, right? Where you treat and the high cost of reuse is transporting it to where the green space is that you need it, right? Something like 80% of the cost of a reuse project is just distribution. So because you have got to put in a whole new distribution system. The other thing I would add is that in the United States, reuse is probably topped out at about 10% of water supply. It's an important water supply within the realm of water supply opportunities, right? But where they're going in San Diego, where they're going in El Paso is the traditional, what's called toilet to tap, right? Advanced reuse of water where it's just put right back into the system. And I think that's a direction that many communities are going to have to go forward in the near future.
Thank you. In the back, and then we'll come up to you, and then I have one virtually to get to.
I kind of start with a comment. As a commissioner for the Arizona Power Authority, like Nevada, we homogenize all our hydropower and then redistribute it to the state. And we're forgetting how important hydropower is. So as the Colorado River lowers, right, the head pressure and the amount of electricity we can generate at Hoover Dam goes down. And hydro is one of the cleanest renewable energy sources we have. It also is a balancing source of power because it's 24/7 to solar and wind. So it's critical mix of our energy that's also being impacted, and it's also impacting decisions. There's certain points below which BLM will not let the reservoirs fall in order to keep the generators moving. Right. And so it's another conundrum, another dilemma that we're facing. Arizona, on the other hand, when they did the Groundwater Act of 1980, it created water banking. It also created groundwater management for 7 urban areas of the state where the most population was. And that continues to manage groundwater. And in the banking, municipalities get credits for water recharge of aquifer that they have in the bank. And Mexico is part of our banking in Arizona. When we created the minute that allows Mexico to leave water in the Colorado River, in the reservoirs. And they've used it from time to time, and it's actually been instrumental at one time from keeping us from going below that critical element in the Colorado. So groundwater management, water banking has been critical to Arizona, but we've been doing it for 40 some odd years. I'm not sure what the other states are doing, but it's a very good model to look at how you use water. Palo Verde nuclear power plant. All of the coolant for that power plant comes from Peoria from treated wastewater. And you couldn't have Palo Verde without that wastewater. So Arizona's been very, very advanced in this, and there's some things that other people could learn and from Arizona what they've done.
Thank you. A question I have from the virtual participants is, and I'll direct this one to Edgar and Eugenio, is how can we encourage companies to take a more socially responsible policy or approach to water management like those that you described?
I think it's happening right now. I see more and more companies involved in environmental initiatives. We have organizations like Consejo Consultivo del Agua in Mexico, which collect all the information and digest the data and provide certain examples of how we can collaborate. For instance, in Sonora, we partner with the irrigation district, which is very in charge of manage the water in the valley, and together we invest in the channels and irrigation systems, and we're saving around 25 million of cubic meters of water annually. That kind of projects we would like to see more and more with our companies. And again, I see more interest right now on the organizations, And actually, some companies have already water experts on key positions to really help the organization to move toward that direction.
Great. Susana or Eugenio, do you have any comments to add to that question?
Yeah, I think that the key idea or the key principle behind corporate engagement is to understand that water security for any company is people water security. So if you don't understand it that way, I think it's how to start building new relationships and really the engagement of the corporates in the process of water management. We have talked here about the challenge we have, and the challenges are really big. And it's not just the amount of water that we need to produce beer or whatever. It's the amount of water that we need as a society. And in that terms, of course, many companies are moving in that direction. But I think there is still many things to do in terms of collaboration, as Edgar has mentioned.
Thank you, Edgar. Susana?
Thank you. Yes, the Council and its experts believe that it is possible to talk about circular economy of water. And in Mexico, the use of water for industries represent 4.5% of the usage, and it's the most efficient usage today we have seen. There are many cases, such as the ones Edgar and Eugenio have talked about in the border, but also in other countries, other states, sorry. And we believe that the businesses, the private sector are part of the solutions, promoting efficient and innovation in the usage of water.
Thank you, Susana.
I'd like to add something to that, because I think innovation is something, and collaboration is something that's been kind of resonating here. I agree with Susana that I think industry is small potatoes compared to the size of the problem, right? But where industry can be useful is that many of us as agencies, we are located in only certain areas, and industry are boots on the ground for us, right? They hire residents. They can create education opportunities with regards to understanding the value of water. So really, I see the private sector as an opportunity to, and the NGOs as an opportunity to build capacity and knowledge with regards to what is the crisis in water. And right now, given the fact that many cities are especially in Mexico, are experiencing water shortages where they cannot have water 24 hours a day. And also in the United States, it's been in the press quite a bit what the situation is with drought. And I think right now we have a golden opportunity to build on that, to do very aggressive moves in terms of water conservation efforts.
Thank you. There's a question here. Thank you.
Hi. Well, for me, it's an opinion and a question and a challenge maybe after what I'm going to say is, I was born in Monterrey, what the place you were mentioning, and my family there is getting a bath with buckets and stuff like that. Like, this is really disastrous. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the private sector, I think it's 5% could influence in all this thing about water usage, but it's much more a regional public thing to solve, because water is a natural resource that everybody needs. Right now, Mexico is investing in oil, trains, and stuff like that, but not in water. Right. And if you see in Tamaulipas and Veracruz, the footprint of plants, desalinization plants, there's none. And you see Houston area, and this with a lot of plants, desalinization plants over there working and having their own resource of water. So what's happening? Like, I don't think it's a public agenda thing. It's not if the Tamaulipas party is one and the federal one is another party. How Mexico and U.S. is trying to solve politically, and because the desalinization plan is billions of dollars of investments. So sometimes they leave it to the state to make the investment, and they will not do it if they are only 6 years in power. They will not see the benefits. So how in a national level, we are trying to solve the crisis of water because at the end, as you were saying, it's not only affecting Mexico, it's affecting the border, it's affecting everyone. So how this thing's gonna move forward, how we're gonna see investments in the Mexican side for the desalination plants, because the private sector can help a little bit, but this is a big issue.
Thank you. Right now, we are exploring some kinds of projects to have more water. Estamos implementando proyectos en la cuenca del Río Colorado. We have some collaboration with the United States. The United States is investing in Mexico. We are exploring a program. My government is looking for some projects que generen agua, que aporten agua. I think right now we are looking for that projects. If you have seen all the new governments on the border has water in their agenda, and we are going to that governors and said, okay, we can do this like Mexico. There is this opportunity. We can reply that opportunity in Rio Bravo River. So to have more water, not only to comply with the treaty, also to have more water with our region, to have a better, more efficiency in the water. Yes, we are working on that. Yeah, I think we are. I have the esperanza. I'm hope that this can do very better in the future.
And just let me add to what you just commented on. Minute 319, which is what she was specifically talking about, actually invested $21 million from the United States into Mexico. And this came from the states of California, Arizona, and Nevada on doing water conservation efforts in the irrigation districts. And they conserved about 124,000 acre feet with that investment. And it becomes a permanent conservation over time. And right now we are that was a pilot program. Now we're going into a more permanent program where Department of Interior has made available $31.5 million for conservation efforts in Mexico. And it's really related to ag, a lot of it. There is opportunities for municipalities, but definitely we are seeing it as a shared problem between the two countries, because we realize that almost just about every single Fortune 500 company from the United States has installations in Mexico, and they're an important trade partner for us. And so definitely, U.S. dollars are flowing into Mexico for this conservation, and we want to replicate that in the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande area. We do not have that right now along the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande, but we do have some good ideas, and we'll hopefully transform to projects fairly soon.
Great.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Edgar.
Eugenio, yeah.
Eugenio, perdón.
Of course, investment is very important, and we cannot think about solving the problems without investments, yeah. But I think it's very important to start changing the way we think about water. We need to change our mind. The drought is going to be here forever. So we need to start living with the drought and start reducing the amount of water that we are using. We cannot think about increasing the supply all the time, because investment is not going to be enough, never is going to be enough if we start thinking about increasing supply. So we need to start thinking how to reduce demand. And it's very important, because then investments are going to be more efficient, and then also start thinking about, as I mentioned, projects and programs with different solutions in the same place. Yeah, nature-based solutions are a very good example. So I think instead of thinking just about investment, we need to change the way we're thinking, the way we are developing projects, and the way we are considering water.
Thank you, Eugenio. I think there's a question here in the front row, and then someone else had one, and then I got one more until they cut us off.
Thanks for the panel. Very, very good. My name is Lance Youngmeyer. I'm president of the Fresh Produce Association of the Americas and chairman of the Border Trade Alliance. So very, very great conversation. I have more of a comment, but it might spur some discussion. Water, of course, is very complex. In the fresh fruit and vegetable sector, we give the gift to each other as countries. When Mexico sends its strawberries or tomatoes to the United States, it's a gift. When the United States sends its apples or its grapes to Mexico, it's a gift that we're sharing with each other. And there's broad implications from what's going on. In California, as we have drought conditions there, growers of produce from there have to make hard decisions. If I have water rights, do I put them into very high-value crops like avocados or almonds, and I send the vegetables to Mexico, so they're making partnerships in Mexico. And this has trade implications because that increases the amount of fruits and vegetables coming to the United States because the demand is there, because the supply chain asks for it. And, that creates issues where the Southeast growers in the United States say, well, Mexico's sending too much. So I view this as an issue where we're sharing water with each other, but it has trade implications. And meanwhile, global events where we have wars and the nearshoring that the Biden administration is asking to do, that's going to bring factories to Mexico. That's going to be very helpful for the economy, but each of those factories have intense water usage. We've seen in recent years that that's caused other issues where in Sonora, for instance, the Yaqui Indians made a strike or blockade on the highway because they thought too much water was going to factories. So it's very complex. We're going to see social issues tied into all this, and I think it highlights the need for more cooperation between the two governments, especially as we think about how supply chains are shifting in the world and how we can help each other. If Mexico's building factories in the desert, well, we still want to have Mexico's agriculture too. So we need to have very good ways to cooperate. So congratulations on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. You've illuminated I think summarized the difficult trade-offs we're talking about here. And I think Eugenio's comment that conserving water is reducing demand has to be a part of figuring out how best to allocate what is there. Because if we can reduce the consumption, there's more to go around. But the scarcity is here for the foreseeable future, and I think that's the trade-off we have to find mechanisms to manage. Question at the back, and then I'll go to the virtual question.
Yes, thank you. This is Hector with the City of Sunland Park, and I have heard about the reductions and all these issues with water, and our southern New Mexico area is one that it does a lot of farming. As Senator Ben Lujan mentioned, there's a lot of expansion now in industrial industry. Do you all foresee any more restrictions, constraints in water from the Rio Bravo? As you all know, as a matter of fact, it bisects our city for the majority of it, and then it goes into Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, Ciudad Juarez area. So that is just a question. Thank you.
Elephant Butte Reservoir has had the lowest levels of water in the reservoir, and it does not look good. We've had historic drought since 2002, as well as in Elephant Butte. This year, for example, Mexico is going to receive one of the lowest amount of allocations that it's ever received in the history, which is 21% of its allocation. We're responsible for providing 60,000 acre feet of water from the Colorado, from the Rio Grande, from the Rockies. That's coming from the Rockies into Mexico. So definitely, I don't see improvement with regards to that, and as such, cities like El Paso and have gone to a more diversified water source. I know the city of Sunland Park, their water source is primarily groundwater and not surface water, right? And in the case of Mexico, the water is used for agricultural. So obviously there's been a diminishing amount of agriculture that's been coming out of the Valle de Juarez per se, right? So I think this is an experience that we're also seeing in the El Paso area and the Sunland Park, southern New Mexico area as well.
Great. I've been asked that our time is up. There was one last question that I just have to acknowledge because I referred to it twice on the policies and tools our governments, U.S. and Mexico, are using to tackle cross-border water sanitation problems. I'll briefly say we work with EPA funding as well as our own capital to invest in transboundary water flows. We're working actively in Tijuana, Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, both Nuevo Laredo and Laredo, just to name the big city pairs. I don't know if there's anything you want to just briefly comment about the Tijuana River. We did allude to it in each of our remarks, and that might be something that's I know that's a prominent issue for both SILA and IBWC.
Sí. Es un tema primario, el tema de Tijuana. It's a very important issue for us. And we are working on that. Mexico is working with the government, with UEPA, and Conagua is working to establish some projects to attend that issue. Well,
and I can add a little bit to that. So obviously sanitation is one of our core missions as well, and we do operate 2 wastewater treatment plants, one in Nogales and San Diego. Because of the advocacy from local communities in Southern California, $300 million was provided through the USMCA to find solutions for addressing the pollution coming from Tijuana. And so because of that, EPA and Conagua have been negotiating an agreement or a statement of intent where they're looking at what types of investments can be done on both sides of the border. And right now they're close to finishing up a negotiation of a 5-year investment. And I don't want to rain on their parade because they'll be the ones to announce what it is. Because they're the ones that have been leading this effort. But they've negotiated or close to finishing negotiations with Conagua on a 5-year investment plan for investments in Tijuana to address the sanitation issue. And then on our end, one of the preferred alternatives for the use of the $300 million is to expand our international wastewater treatment plant in San Diego. So where are we involved in this? One of the tools that we are going to be using, which we have not used before, and this will be the first time we've applied this, is using the minute process. The minute process is a way the 2 governments come to an agreement, and it's binding. It's equivalent to a treaty. And the agreement or the statement of intent that Conagua and EPA are negotiating, we are working towards encapsulating it within a minute. So therefore, investments will go beyond any administration's likes. For instance, one of the things that we see, I've worked in water and wastewater infrastructure for 20 years, and particularly in Mexico, is that long-term investments in Mexico are very difficult because Mexico's budget is a year-to-year basis. And so having a minute to ensure a 5-year plan will be a very useful tool in order to ensure that these investments are done. And within it, we're also including elements and opportunities for us for based on funding that we receive in terms of reimbursement for the operation of the sanitation plant, we are looking at opportunities of using that funding to reinvest in maintenance in infrastructure that's important to the United States in Mexico. And so that's kind of some of the innovation that's going into this.
Great. With that, I thank you everyone for your questions, your attention. Thank you for our panelists in Mexico, and hopefully we can all be in one place next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.